I never imagined that one evening could completely shatter everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the man I married. It all began with a company dinner, one of those formal gatherings my husband always insisted I attend to show support for his career. I didn't want to go. There was a strange heaviness in my chest that day, a feeling I couldn't shake. But I smiled, slipped into the dress he had chosen for me, and told myself I was just being silly. My husband had worked at the same firm for nearly a decade. He always spoke so highly of his boss, Michael Bennett. "He's helped me so much," he'd say. "I owe him everything." I had only met Michael Bennett a few times, always in passing. He was charming, sure, but there was something about the way his eyes lingered that made me uneasy. That night, the restaurant buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and shallow compliments. My husband was busy mingling, making his rounds, laughing just a little too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I was left alone at the table, sipping water and pretending to check my phone. Then Michael Bennett came over. He sat down beside me too close. At first I thought maybe he just wanted to be friendly. Maybe he was trying to keep me company. But within minutes I realized something was terribly wrong. What he whispered to me, the suggestion behind that smug smile, it made my blood run cold. I froze. I scanned the room for my husband, but he was laughing and clinking glasses with some executive, completely unaware. Those few minutes were all it took to shake the foundation of our marriage. What happened next changed everything forever. I sat there frozen, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. Michael Bennett leaned in so casually, his voice calm, but the words he spoke felt like knives. He talked about how lonely these events could be, how stunning I looked in that dress, and how my husband was too busy chasing success to notice what he had at home. At first I forced a smile, thinking maybe I had misunderstood, but the way he looked at me, as if I were something he could just reach out and take, left no doubt in my mind. I tried to change the subject and even laughed nervously, hoping he'd back off, but he didn't. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like we were sharing some private joke. "You don't have to play the perfect wife tonight," he said. "No one's watching, especially not your husband." I felt sick. I stood up quickly, pretending I needed some air. My hands were shaking, but I tried not to show it. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to embarrass my husband. Isn't that strange? Even after what was said to me, my first instinct was to protect him. I found a quiet corner outside the restaurant and took a few deep breaths. My mind was racing. Should I tell him? Would he believe me? Michael Bennett was his mentor, his biggest supporter at work, the man who got him promoted, the man who introduced us to everyone at that dinner with pride in his voice. I felt trapped in a twisted game where every move could break something fragile. When I walked back inside, I saw Michael Bennett laughing with my husband like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my husband and tell him everything, but I didn't. I just sat there quietly, watching the two of them talk like best friends while my heart pounded in my chest. The worst part was I wasn't even sure anymore what my husband would do if I told him. Would he defend me? Or would he defend the man who held the key to his career? That doubt began to crack something deep inside me, and once those cracks appeared, there was no going back. The ride home that night was painfully silent. My husband talked about how well the dinner went. He mentioned how Michael Bennett promised to put in a good word for him with the board. He was glowing with excitement, unaware of the storm raging inside me. I just sat there, nodding silently, my fingers gripping the seatbelt a little too tightly. Part of me wanted to blurt it all out right then. Just say it, get it off my chest. But something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of not being believed. Maybe it was the fear of becoming the reason everything he had worked so hard for would start to unravel. In the days that followed, I grew distant. I tried to act normal, but Michael Bennett's whispered words echoed relentlessly in my mind. My husband noticed the change. One evening he asked gently if something was wrong. I lied. "I'm just tired," I said. He kissed my forehead softly and told me he had another late meeting with Michael Bennett. That's when the knot in my stomach tightened, almost suffocating me. I wanted to scream, "He's not who you think he is," but I stayed silent. Instead, I began keeping a journal, pouring every detail onto the pages, every moment from that night, every emotion, every lingering doubt. It was the only way I could hold on to my sanity. Then came the text. Somehow, Michael Bennett had gotten my number. His messages arrived late at night, nothing outright inappropriate, but each one carried that same hidden meaning. "Hope you made it home safely the other night. I meant what I said. You deserve more." I didn't respond, but the silence didn't stop him. I thought about blocking him, but I hesitated. I needed proof, something real in case this ever came out. Because if it was my word against his, I already knew who everyone would believe. At the same time, I started noticing changes in my husband. He grew more defensive, more distracted. He stopped asking how I was doing. His attention shifted completely to work, to Michael Bennett. He spoke about him constantly, as if this man could do no wrong. The more he praised Michael Bennett, the more isolated I felt. It was like watching my marriage slip through my fingers, unsure if I was losing my husband to ambition or to the man who had quietly inserted himself into both our lives with a smile that now haunted me. A week later, my husband invited Michael Bennett over for dinner. I stood in the kitchen holding a bowl of salad, completely still. When I asked why, he said it was just a casual meal, something to show appreciation. "He's been good to me," he said. "I want him to feel welcome in our home." I stared at him, wondering if he could see how much that sentence cut me. But he didn't. He just smiled, kissed my cheek, and went back to setting the table. The night arrived faster than I was ready for. I spent hours preparing the house, not out of politeness, but because I needed to keep moving. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. How was I supposed to sit across the table from the man who had quietly tried to break my trust, while my husband poured him wine and called him a role model? When Michael Bennett arrived, he acted as if nothing had happened. He greeted me with that same polite, practiced smile. He even handed me a small bouquet of flowers, like some kind of sick joke. My hands trembled as I took them, but my husband didn't notice. During dinner, I barely spoke. I watched them laugh, share inside jokes. They talked about projects at work, but beneath it all, I could feel Michael Bennett's eyes on me, watching, testing. Halfway through the meal, my husband left the room to take a work call. It was just me and Michael Bennett at the table. He leaned forward slightly and said in a low voice, "You're quiet tonight. I hope you haven't forgotten our little moment." My throat went dry. I looked at the door, hoping my husband would come back in, but he didn't. Then as I stood up to clear the plates, Michael Bennett's hand brushed mine, deliberate, slow. I pulled back sharply, and the sound of a plate clattering onto the counter shattered the silence. He smiled as if it meant nothing. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart pounded wildly. I walked out of the room, went straight to our bedroom, and locked the door behind me. In that moment, I knew something had to change. But what I didn't know was just how far this would go and how badly it would break everything that was left. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my phone, my hands still shaking. I had no idea what to do next. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I didn't even know how to explain it. How do you tell people that your husband's boss is slowly tearing apart your sanity while your husband smiles and calls him a blessing? A few minutes later, I heard the front door close. My husband was walking Michael Bennett out. I held my breath, listening for footsteps coming toward the bedroom. When none came, I slowly unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. He was in the living room, pacing. When he noticed me, he asked if I was okay, said I had disappeared suddenly and hoped nothing was wrong. I stared at him, searching for the right words. "I don't trust him," I said finally, my voice small and unsure. "Michael Bennett, he's not who you think he is." My husband looked confused, maybe even slightly amused. "He's intent," he said, "but he's not a bad guy. You just don't know him like I do." Something inside me cracked the way he brushed it off, the way he chose to protect the man. The man who had crossed every line made me feel invisible. I turned and went back to the bedroom, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't sleep that night. The twist came 2 days later. I received an email. At first, I assumed it was work-related, but when I opened it, I froze. Attached was a photo of me at the dinner table, looking visibly uncomfortable, with Michael Bennett's hand grazing mine. The angle suggested it had been taken through the dining room window. My stomach dropped. The subject line was simple: I see everything. I looked around the room like someone might be watching me right now. My hands went ice cold. Someone had been outside our house. Someone had been watching. And it wasn't just about what happened that night. It was a warning. I didn't know what to do. If I showed the photo to my husband, would he believe me now? Or would he think I staged it? Was Michael Bennett behind it or someone else? The timing was too perfect, too calculated. Then the second message came. No photos this time, just a line that chilled me to the bone. Tell your husband, and everything falls apart. The fear I felt wasn't just for myself anymore. It was for the cracks in my marriage, the lies already hanging in the air. Someone was playing a dangerous game, and I was trapped in the middle of it. I felt like I was walking through a maze where every turn led deeper into something I didn't understand. What scared me the most was the feeling that someone close to us, someone we trusted, wasn't just watching, they were waiting. The next morning, I didn't pretend anymore. I printed the emails, the photo, every message he had sent. I placed them in a folder and waited. My husband came down the stairs half awake, sipping his coffee, talking about a project deadline. I didn't say a word until he sat down. Then I slid the folder across the table. He looked confused at first. Then his face changed as he opened it. The photo, the emails, everything. I watched the color drain from his face, his eyes moving quickly, jaw tightening with each line he read. For the first time, he was quiet. No excuses, no laughter, just silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I blinked hard to hold back the tears. "Because I didn't know if you'd believe me," I said. "Because every time I tried, you were too busy defending him." He didn't respond right away. He just sat there staring at the evidence of the man he thought was his mentor. It hit him slowly, painfully. The betrayal wasn't just mine, it was his too. Michael Bennett had manipulated both of us in different ways. That evening, my husband confronted him. I wasn't there, but I know he didn't yell. I also know the truth was laid bare that night, and it could no longer be ignored. By the following week, Michael Bennett had stepped down from his position, citing personal reasons. No one at the office knew the real story, but it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what came next. My husband and I began counseling, not just to rebuild trust, but to understand where we had lost each other along the way. It wasn't easy. Some things were too broken to fully repair, but we tried. We had to. Because in the end, this wasn't just about what Michael Bennett did. It was about what we ignored, the red flags, the silences, the growing distance. That night didn't just shatter our marriage, it exposed the truth we were both too scared to face. And sometimes that's what it takes, not to destroy something, but to finally wake up and decide whether to fix it or let it go.